My father slapped me at my sister's wedding in front of 300 guests, not because I shamed the family, but because I refused to hand over the home I built with my own hands. The music stopped, the ballroom froze, and in that silence, my family revealed exactly what I had always been to them: a wallet, not a daughter. They thought that a $2.8 million penthouse was the height of my success. They thought I would break under their humiliation. What they didn't know was that behind the glass and marble they envied, I had been building something far greater, an empire worth $53 million. And for years I had quietly saved them while they called me selfish. The next morning, when they arrived at my door with measuring tape, as if my home was already theirs, they had no idea they were about to meet the real Alexandra Mitchell. The sting of my father's hand had not faded by the time I boarded the red-eye. Back to Seattle. My cheek was still warm, but it wasn't pain that burned. It was memory. And the bitter taste of humiliation I refused to let define me. Seattle's skyline greeted me like a fortress of glass and steel, and when the elevator carried me up to the 40th floor of the Columbia Center, I felt the city stretch beneath me, alive and indifferent. This office, this view over Elliott Bay was mine, and only blocks away stood the penthouse I had worked 18 years to claim, a place my family treated like a toy to be passed along as if my sacrifices had never existed. I told myself I wouldn't let them live in my head, but the truth is, they were carved into me long before the wedding slap. Growing up in Akron, Ohio, our house smelled of laundry detergent and fried chicken grease. The kind of scent that clings to curtains and coats long after you've stopped noticing it. My father, Robert Mitchell, came home every evening with concrete dust in his hair, his boots leaving trails of gray across the linoleum. He was a man built from calluses, convinced that toughness was love. My mother, Linda, was softer on the surface, a third-grade teacher with warm sweaters and endless lesson plans, but when it came to choosing between her daughters, her loyalty always bent toward Bella. Bella was the sun in that house, bright golden, adored. I was the dependable shadow, the girl who got A's, who learned to iron shirts at 9, who never asked for more than what was given. When Bella cried for ballet lessons, Dad picked up overtime. When I asked to apply to the University of Washington, he frowned, muttered about out-of-state tuition, and reminded me that family comes before ambition. I didn't argue. I worked. 2 jobs, 3 scholarships, sleepless nights, coding until dawn. Every victory I carved was with my own hands. While Bella floated on cushions I had never been offered. Seattle was my escape, and it became my proving ground. My first apartment had peeling paint and neighbors who screamed through the walls, but I didn't care. I was free. I climbed. Junior developer at Microsoft, then senior. Nights fueled by Red Bull, and the kind of desperation only someone with nothing to fall back on can sustain. When I co-founded North Star Technologies, I was 28, still too young to be taken seriously by half the venture capitalists we pitched, but David Kim, my partner, my first real believer, saw the steel behind my smile. We landed a government contract, then another. By 32, I signed the deed to my penthouse, marble counters gleaming like a mirror of everything I had built. I remember the day I moved in, standing in the walk-in closet, bigger than my childhood bedroom, laughing through tears. Not because of the clothes that would one day fill it, but because for once, no one could tell me I hadn't earned something. But family has a way of chasing you, even across state lines. My phone never stopped buzzing calls about bills, sudden emergencies, vague accusations that I had changed. I paid them, quietly, consistently. The mortgage when Dad fell behind, the medical bills when Mom needed surgery, Bella's car when hers was repossessed. They never knew it was me, not really. The checks arrived anonymously, and they told themselves it must have been luck, or maybe a distant uncle's generosity. I let them believe it. Maybe I was foolish enough to think that one day, gratitude would break through the rot. Instead, they called me selfish, cold, work-obsessed, the daughter who forgot where she came from. When Bella announced her engagement to Tyler Mitchell, I should have known what was coming. Tyler was smooth charming, with a smile that flickered too quickly from warmth to calculation. A real estate agent with more ambition than ethics, his handshake was all performance, his eyes already scanning for what he could own. The wedding was held at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, gilded ceilings, crystal chandeliers, tables dressed in ivory linen. No expense spared, though I knew exactly whose credit card had buckled under the weight of it. I flew in from Seattle in a designer gown that cost more than my first car, thinking foolishly, That maybe this time my family would see me not as the wallet, not as the rival, but as Alexandra, the sister who had survived and succeeded. I was seated in the second row, close enough to see the glow in Bella's eyes as she walked the aisle. Close enough to catch Dad's approving smile as he placed her hand in Tyler's. Not close enough, though, to stand beside her as maid of honor. That role belonged to her college roommate, a girl whose name I barely remembered, but whose presence reminded me that Bella would always choose anyone else first. Still, I clapped, I smiled, I raised my glass. Because that's what you do when you want to believe the lie that family, at its core, can be mended. The first crack came during the cocktail hour. I had stepped outside to catch my breath, the night air cool against my skin, when I overheard my father and Tyler near the garden arches. "Don't worry, Tyler," murmured his voice, low but eager. "After the honeymoon, she'll come around. It's just a matter of time." Dad's grunt carried weight, the sound of a man already counting what wasn't his. I stood, frozen champagne glass trembling in my hand. They weren't talking about Bella's new life or business, or even family harmony. They were talking about me, about my penthouse. The knowledge settled in my stomach like lead, but I pushed it down, plastered a smile across my face, and walked back into the ballroom as if I hadn't heard a thing. Dinner was served beneath the chandeliers, laughter rising with the clinking of glasses. I tried to enjoy it, to pretend the world wasn't shifting beneath my feet. But then came Dad's speech. He started harmlessly enough, praising Bella's beauty, her grace, her understanding of what family really means. Then his gaze found me, and his tone hardened. Unlike some people, he said, his voice carrying over the hushed tables, who think a fancy job and a shiny apartment make them better than the family who raised them. Laughter dimmed, forks stilled. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every word felt like a nail driven in public view. I pushed back my chair, its scrape against the marble loud in the silence. "Excuse me," I whispered, my dignity the only shield I had left. But Dad wasn't finished. He dropped the microphone, strode across the floor, his hand gripping my wrist like he had every right to. "We're not done here." "Yes, we are." My voice shook, but I forced it steady. "I'm not your pawn, Dad." The words barely left my mouth before the crack of his palm lit the air. The room froze. Bella gasped, Mom hissed something about embarrassment, and Tyler looked away. 300 guests, and not one stepped forward. I walked out, head high, cheeks stinging, heels echoing against the marble. But in that moment, I wasn't broken. I was awake. Because humiliation, I realized, was only fuel. And Alexandra Mitchell was done playing the part of the quiet daughter, the disposable sister, the invisible success story. They thought they had stripped me bare in front of the world. What they didn't know was that I had been sharpening my edges for years, waiting for the moment when they would finally understand what it meant to underestimate me. That night back in Seattle, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood at the window of my penthouse, the city lights blazing below. My reflections stared back, tired, furious, unyielding. I thought of the whispers, the manipulation, the entitlement that had shadowed me since childhood. And I thought of the empire I had built, stone by stone, dollar by dollar, hidden in plain sight. If my family wanted a war, they had chosen the wrong battlefield. Because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to fight for their approval. I was going to fight for myself. And this time, I intended to win. The ice sculpture was melting slowly under the ballroom lights when my parents cornered me. I had been admiring the intricate swan necks carved from a single block of ice, thinking about how much this wedding must have cost, when I felt someone approach me from behind. "We need to talk about something important, Alex." My father's voice carried that tone I remembered from childhood, the one that meant business. Robert Mitchell, at 62, still had the broad shoulders of a man who'd spent decades swinging hammers, and when he wanted your attention, he got it. I turned around to find both my parents standing there, my mother Linda clutching her champagne glass like a lifeline. The massive flower arrangement behind us provided perfect cover from the other wedding guests. White lilies and roses towered above our heads, their sweet scent suddenly overwhelming in the warm ballroom air. "What's going on, Dad?" I asked, though something in my stomach already knew this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. "Bella and Tyler need that penthouse of yours," he said. "Oh, preamble. No warm-up. You're just one person rattling around in all that space." The words hit me like cold water. I actually laughed, thinking he was making some kind of joke. "What are we really talking about?" But his face remained stone serious, and my mother stepped closer, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes hard as winter. "Family helps family, sweetheart. Bella's starting her new life. She deserves nice things. The laughter died in my throat. They weren't joking. My own parents were standing at my sister's wedding reception, surrounded by 300 guests asking me to hand over my home. I'm not joking, my father continued, his voice getting louder despite our proximity to the other guests. Tyler's business is taking off. They deserve a nice place to start their family. You've got more money than you know what to do with. The casual dismissal of everything I'd worked for stung more than I expected. I had worked 2 jobs through college while they paid for Bella's full ride. I had lived in a studio apartment with black mold while they bought her a car. I had built my career from nothing while she got family-funded internships. Dad, that penthouse is mine. I worked for it. I paid for it. I'm not giving it away because Tyler can't afford his own place. My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay calm. A few guests at nearby cocktail tables glanced our way, sensing tension but trying to be polite about it. Don't give me that attitude, my father snapped, stepping closer. His face was flushing red, matching the wine in his glass. After everything we taught you about family values, this is how you respond. What values? I shot back. The ones where I worked 3 jobs to pay for college while you handed Bella everything on a silver platter. My mother's grip tightened on my wrist, her manicured nails digging into my skin. After everything we sacrificed for you, she whispered, but her voice carried venom. Don't be selfish, Alex. Family comes first. The words sacrificed hit me like a physical blow. What exactly did you sacrifice for me? I asked, my voice shaking now with anger and hurt. You paid for Bella's education, her car, her apartment deposit. You co-signed her credit cards and bailed her out when she overspent. What did you ever sacrifice for me? My father's face darkened further, his cheeks now the same deep red as the burgundy tablecloths around us. The string quartet's soft melody seemed to fade as blood rushed to my ears. Don't you dare use that tone with me, young lady, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I don't care how much money you think you have, you're still my daughter, and you will show me respect. The childhood fear hit me unexpectedly. For a moment, I was 12 years old again. Being lectured for getting a B+ instead of an A, for not being grateful enough for hand-me-down clothes, for not being as naturally charming as my little sister. But I wasn't 12 anymore. I was 34 years old, successful, independent, and I owned a home that I had earned through years of sacrifice and hard work. I respect you, Dad, but I'm not giving away my home. It's not happening. His face went from red to purple. Several guests were definitely staring now, including my brother Danny, who looked concerned from across the room. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, my father said, his voice getting louder with each word. Done for me? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Like what? Name. One thing you've done for me in the last 10 years that you didn't also do for Bella, except more generously for her. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother looked between us, clearly wanting to say something, but not sure how to diffuse the situation she'd helped create. You ungrateful little brat, my father finally said, his voice shaking with rage. We raised you better than this. You raised me to work for everything I got, I replied, my own voice steadying as my anger crystallized into something colder and more determined. Well, congratulations. I worked for that penthouse. It's mine. And I'm keeping it. I started to turn away, ready to rejoin the reception and pretend this conversation had never happened. But my father's hand shot out and grabbed my arm. We're not done here, he said, his grip tight enough to leave marks. Yes, we are, I said, pulling free. This conversation is over. But as I walked away, I could feel his fury radiating behind me like heat from an open flame. Guests stepped aside as I passed, their polite smiles not quite hiding their curiosity about what they'd witnessed. The worst part wasn't the confrontation itself. It was the realization that my parents had planned this. They had chosen my sister's wedding day, surrounded by family and friends, to ambush me with demands for my home. They had calculated that the social pressure and family obligation would make me cave. They had underestimated. But as I rejoined the reception, trying to smile and act normal while my heart pounded with adrenaline, I had no idea how much worse things were about to get. I tried to compose myself as I walked back toward my assigned table, but my hands were still shaking from the confrontation. The elegant ballroom suddenly felt suffocating, all crystal chandeliers and forced smiles. I could feel my father's anger following me like a storm cloud, his heavy footsteps echoing behind me on the marble floor. Other guests were starting to notice. Conversations became quieter as I passed, eyes following my movement with that particular kind of curiosity that comes when people sense drama but don't want to appear rude by staring directly. My cousin Janet gave me a concerned look from across the room, but I managed what I hoped was a reassuring smile. The dinner service had begun, servers moving gracefully between tables with plates of herb-crusted salmon and roasted vegetables. I forced myself to take small bites, to participate in the polite conversation at my table, to laugh at my uncle's terrible jokes about marriage. But I could feel my father's presence like electricity in the air, waiting for something. That something came during the speeches. My mother went first, sharing sweet stories about Bella's childhood, her voice warm with genuine affection. Tyler's best man followed with tales of college adventures and bachelor party, mishaps that made everyone laugh. Then it was my father's turn. Robert Mitchell stood slowly, his large frame commanding attention as conversations died down across the ballroom. He looked handsome in his rented tuxedo, his silver hair neatly combed, and for a moment he was just a proud father at his daughter's wedding. "My beautiful daughter, Bella, understands what family really means," he began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "She knows that no matter how far life takes you, no matter what success you achieve, you never forget the people who got you there." Applause rippled through the crowd. Bella beamed from the head table, her hand intertwined with Tyler's. It was a perfect father of the bride moment, exactly what you'd expect at a wedding like this. But then his tone shifted and his eyes found mine across the room. "She knows that success means nothing if you forget the people who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who believed in you when no one else would. Unlike some people who think a fancy job and a big paycheck mean you're better than your family." The words hit me like a physical blow. Every eye in the ballroom seemed to turn toward me, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. This was my sister's wedding, and my father was using his speech to publicly shame me for refusing to give away my home. Bella's smile faltered, slightly confusion crossing her face. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My brother Danny, sitting 3 tables away, looked horrified. I couldn't sit there and let him humiliate me in front of 300 people. My chair scraped loudly against the marble floor as I stood, the sound echoing through the suddenly quiet ballroom. That's when my father dropped the microphone and strode toward me, his face dark with fury. "Sit down," he commanded, his voice carrying across the silent room. "We're not done here." "Yes, we are, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. But he was already reaching for me, his large hand grabbing my wrist with enough force to leave bruises. "You will respect me in front of these people," he hissed. The grip was tight, controlling, designed to force me back into my chair like a misbehaving child. For a split second, I was transported back to childhood, to all the times his physical presence had been used to end arguments before they could really begin. But I wasn't a child anymore. "Let go of me," I said, jerking my arm free. That's when my father completely lost control. "Hand over those keys, Alex," he roared, his voice booming across the ballroom with enough force to make the crystal glasses ring. "Bella deserves that penthouse more than you do." The silence that followed was deafening. 300 people sat frozen forks halfway to their mouths, wineglasses suspended in air. Even the servers stopped moving, trays balanced in their hands as they watched this family drama unfold. "That's my home that I bought with my money," I said, my voice steady and clear in the terrible quiet. Something in my father's face shifted then, a kind of desperate rage that I'd never seen before. His control, his authority, his ability to make me comply through sheer force of will was slipping away in front of everyone who mattered to him. The slap came without warning. The crack of his palm against my cheek echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Someone dropped a glass, the sound of shattering crystal sharp in the stunned silence. The pain was immediate and burning, spreading across my face like fire. I could taste blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my cheek. But worse than the physical pain was the shock, the public humiliation, the realization that my own father had just hit me in front of my sister's wedding guests. Bella's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Tyler stepped back from the scene, his face pale. Other guests half rose from their chairs, unsure whether to intervene or pretend they hadn't seen what they'd just witnessed. "Alex," my mother's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You're embarrassing the whole family. Not Dad's behavior, not the slap." My mere presence was an embarrassment. I touched my burning cheek, feeling the heat radiating from the handprint my father had left there. For a moment, the ballroom spun around me, All those staring faces blurring together into a kaleidoscope of shock and judgment. Then something crystallized inside me, cold and hard and unbreakable. I straightened my shoulders and began walking toward the exit. My heels clicked against the marble floor in a steady rhythm that seemed to echo through the silent ballroom. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. As I passed the head table, I caught a glimpse of Danny across the room. He was standing now, his young face twisted with fury, clearly ready to come to my defense. The sight of him, my baby brother willing to stand up for me when our parents wouldn't, nearly broke my composure. But it was Tyler who caught my attention most. While everyone else sat frozen in shock, he had his phone out, typing frantically. Even in this moment, he was calculating, planning, working an angle. That's when I knew this wasn't over. Whatever my father and Tyler had planned, whatever conversation I'd overheard during cocktails, my refusal to comply had just escalated everything. I walked out of that ballroom with my dignity intact, but I had no idea that the real war was just beginning. I spent that night in my penthouse, staring at the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, an ice pack pressed against my swollen cheek. The city lights blurred through my tears, turning the Space Needle into a watercolor smear against the darkness. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from shocked wedding guests, each notification like salt in an open wound. Can't believe what happened tonight. Your father was completely out of line. Sarah from college. So sorry you had to go through that. Nobody deserved what Robert did. My cousin Janet. That was absolutely unacceptable behavior. You handled it with more grace than most people would have. A coworker of my mother's I barely knew. But mixed in with the genuine sympathy were the messages that cut deeper. Family disagreements happen, Alex. Maybe you should have handled it differently. From my Aunt Linda. We all need to forgive and move forward. This is what family does. From Uncle Jim. The worst part was scrolling through every single message and realizing that not one came from my immediate family. Not my parents, not Bella, not Tyler. Radio silence from the people who should have been apologizing, explaining, reaching out to make sure I was okay. By morning, the bruise had bloomed across my cheek like a dark flower. Purple and yellow and impossible to hide. I'd barely slept replaying the events over and over, trying to understand how a family celebration had turned into public humiliation. At 9 a.m. sharp, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Bella and Tyler stood in my hallway like nothing had happened. Like my father hadn't slapped me in front of 300 people less than 12 hours ago. I opened the door, still in my pajamas, the ice pack in my free hand. Bella looked stunning even at 9 in the morning, wearing white designer athleisure that probably cost more than most people's rent. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail, and she carried measuring tape and fabric samples like props in some home improvement show. Tyler stood beside her in a crisp button-down shirt, holding a venti Starbucks coffee that he definitely hadn't brought for me. His real estate agent smile was firmly in place, the kind that probably closed million-dollar deals. We're just here to get measurements for our furniture, Bella said brightly, trying to push past me like this was a normal sister visit. I blocked the doorway, my brain struggling to process the audacity. Excuse me, Tyler sighed with the exaggerated patience of someone dealing with a difficult client. Don't be difficult, Alex. Dad already told everyone you're giving us the place as a wedding gift. We need measurements before our honeymoon Tuesday. The casual certainty in his voice made my blood pressure spike. They weren't asking. They weren't hoping. They had already decided, planned, and moved forward as if my consent was irrelevant. After Dad slapped me in front of everyone, "You seriously think I'm handing over my home?" Bella rolled her eyes, like all I was being overdramatic about a minor inconvenience. It was just a family disagreement, Alex. Don't blow it out of proportion. Besides, you're being selfish. I'm starting a family, and you're just a workaholic living alone in all this space. The word selfish hit me like another slap. Here I was the daughter who had worked 3 jobs through college, who had never asked for financial help, who had built everything from scratch, and I was selfish for wanting to keep what I'd earned. You need to leave, I said, stepping back to close the door. But Tyler's foot shot out, blocking it. This isn't over, Alex. Dad's right about you. You can't keep being selfish forever. Family comes first, whether you like it or not. I slammed the door with enough force to rattle the frame, then immediately turned the deadbolt and engaged the security chain. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't hurt. It was from pure fury. Through the door, I could hear Tyler's raised voice. You can't hide in there forever. We have legal options. Legal options. For what? Breaking and entering theft. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. But as their voices faded down the hallway, I realized they were serious. Whatever this was, whatever they'd planned, they truly believed they had some claim to my home. The conversation I'd overheard between Tyler and my father was starting to make sense. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment request. This was orchestrated. I walked to my kitchen island, where yesterday's mail sat unopened, and started flipping through it with shaking hands. Bills, advertisements, wedding, thank you cards that would never be sent now. Then I found something that made my stomach drop. A change of address confirmation from the Postal Service. For Isabella Mitchell, formerly Harper. Forwarding mail from my parents' address to my penthouse address. Effective immediately. I grabbed my laptop and logged into my building's package management system. 3 deliveries scheduled for today, all addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Tyler Mitchell at my apartment number. Wedding gifts. They'd given out my address as their own. My phone rang, making me jump. Danny's name appeared on the screen. Alex. His voice was tight with anger. Are you okay? I can't believe Dad did that. The concern in his voice, the first genuine family support I'd heard since the wedding, nearly broke my composure. I'm fine, I lied. Just trying to process everything. It's not fine. None of this is fine. He had no right to hit you. And now Bella's posting on Instagram about packing for her new penthouse life. She's using pictures of your building, my free hand clenched into a fist. What do you mean packing? She's been posting stories all morning. Videos of her sorting through clothes, talking about how excited she is to start her new life in downtown Seattle. She's acting like it's already decided. I pulled up Instagram on my laptop while keeping Danny on the phone. Sure enough, Bella's stories showed her folding designer clothes into suitcases, adding text overlays about new beginnings and dreams coming true. The final story was a photo of my building's exterior with the caption, finally, getting the life I deserve. Danny, I need you to tell me something honestly. Do you know what Dad and Tyler have planned? Because this feels bigger than just asking for my apartment. There was a long pause. Alex, they've been talking about this for months. Ever since Tyler started having money problems. Dad thinks you owe the family because you've been successful. He keeps saying you forgot where you came from, money problems. There it was. This wasn't about family values or helping Bella start her married life. This was about Tyler needing a financial solution to whatever mess he'd created. How bad are Tyler's money problems? I don't know. Details. But I heard Dad on the phone with someone last week, talking about how Tyler just needed to get through the next few months. Something about debts and deadlines. The pieces were falling into place, but I still didn't have the full picture. What I did know was that my family had decided I was their solution to someone else's problem, and they were willing to destroy our relationship to get what they wanted. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Time to be reasonable, Alex. This can go easy or hard. Your choice. I showed the message to my laptop camera so Danny could see it through our video call. That's Tyler's number, Danny said grimly. Alex, I think you need to call the police. But even as he said it, I knew the police couldn't help with what was coming. This was about family money and years of resentment that had finally found a target. I was about to discover just how far my own family was willing to go to take what they thought they deserved. By Wednesday morning, 4 days after the wedding, my phone had become a weapon of mass destruction. It started at 6 a.m. with a call from my Aunt Linda, her voice sharp with disapproval even before I'd had my coffee. Alex, I heard what happened at the reception. How could you be so heartless? Your sister needs help starting her life. And you're hoarding that enormous place all to yourself. Linda Mitchell Stevens had always been the family enforcer, the one who made sure everyone stayed in line and followed the unwritten rules about loyalty and sacrifice. At 55, she managed the cardiac unit at Toledo General Hospital with the same iron fist she used to manage family drama. Aunt Linda. Dad hit me in front of 300 people. Maybe we should talk about that instead. Family disagreements happen, Alex. The important thing is doing what's right for Bella. She's starting a family. You're just living alone in all that luxury. I hung up on her, but the calls kept coming. My cousin Jennifer is from Cleveland. Uncle Paul from Detroit. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had strong opinions about my living situation and my character. Then the text messages started flooding in. Group chats. I'd never agreed to join appeared on my phone. Family group chat. Alex's attitude problem. Dad. She thinks she's better than us now. Mom always was selfish, even as a child. Bella. Can't believe my own. Sister won't help me, Tyler. Some people forget their roots, Uncle Jim. Alex needs to remember family comes first. Cousin Mike. Always thought she was stuck. Up. I stared at my phone screen, watching my own family tear me apart in real time. These were people who'd bounced me on their knees as a child, who'd celebrated my high school graduation, who'd sent congratulations cards when I got my first real job. Now they were dissecting my character like vultures picking at roadkill. Another group chat appeared Bella's new home plans. This one had 15 members and was filled with messages about paint colors, furniture arrangements, and moving logistics. They were planning the takeover of my home like a military operation. Should we go with the gray sectional or the beige one for the living room? Bella wrote attaching photos of expensive furniture. The beige would look amazing with those windows, Mom replied. When are the movers coming again? Uncle Jim asked. Saturday at 9 a.m., Tyler responded. Alex should have the keys ready by Friday night. I typed back, this is not happening. Delete this group. My phone rang immediately. My father's name flashed on the screen, and when I answered, he was already shouting, You ungrateful brat! After everything we've sacrificed for this family, this is how you behave, Dad. What exactly have you sacrificed for me in the last 10 years? Name one thing. The silence stretched long enough that I thought he might actually consider the question. Then his voice returned cold and dangerous. You owe us this, Alex. Family helps family. That's how we raised you. Unless that family member is me, apparently. I hung up and immediately blocked his number. Then I blocked my mother. Then Bella's. But they had plenty of relatives willing to serve as their messengers. Thursday evening brought the call I'd been dreading. Danny's voice was barely above a whisper, clearly calling from his dorm room after his roommate had gone to sleep. Alex, I'm so sorry. This is completely insane. Dad's lost his mind. The relief of hearing one family member acknowledge the madness nearly brought me to tears. Tell me what's really going on, Danny. This can't just be about helping Bella. He was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. Tyler's in serious financial trouble. I don't know all the details, but I've heard Dad talking about debts and deadlines. Something about Tyler needing a big score to get out of a hole. How deep of a hole, deep enough that they've been planning this for months. Bella's been posting Instagram stories about packing for her new penthouse. Life. She's using pictures of your building, Alex. She's telling her followers she's moving to Seattle next week. I pulled up Instagram while keeping Danny on the phone. Sure enough, Bella's story feed was a carefully curated fantasy of her new life. Videos of her sorting through designer clothes with captions about fresh starts and new beginnings. Photos of my building's exterior with heart eye emojis and comments about dreams coming true. The final story made my blood run cold. It was a screenshot of a budget truck rental confirmation for Saturday morning, with the caption, Moving Day, Seattle, here I come. Danny, they've actually booked moving trucks. Saturday at 9 a.m. Tyler printed address labels with your apartment number. Dad told Uncle Jim you already agreed to hand over the keys Friday night. The systematic nature of their planning was breathtaking. They weren't hoping I'd change my mind. They'd decided I would comply. And they were moving forward regardless of my consent. Do you know anything about Tyler's debts? Who does he owes money to? I heard. Something about gambling, but Dad shuts up whenever I'm around. All I know is Tyler's desperate, and somehow they've convinced themselves that you're the solution. After I hung up with Danny, I sat in my living room staring out at the Seattle skyline, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. My own family had launched a coordinated campaign to pressure me into giving away my home. They'd created group chats to plan the logistics, spread rumors about my character, and recruited extended family to apply emotional leverage. And somewhere underneath it all was Tyler's mysterious financial crisis, the real driving force behind this elaborate scheme. My phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number. You can't fight the whole family, Alex. Just make this easy on everyone. Then another 5 minutes later, Bella deserves happiness. Don't be the reason she can't have it. And another. Pride goes before a fall. Think about what's really important here. They were trying to break me down through sheer volume, to make me feel isolated and outnumbered until giving in seemed like the only way to make it stop. But something was crystallizing inside me, something cold and hard, not as the flawed but loving people I'd always made excuses for, but as manipulative strangers who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. The daughter they remembered, the one who'd always eventually give in to family pressure, who'd sacrifice her own needs to keep the peace, was gone. I had no idea yet what I was capable of, but I was about to find out. Friday morning, I sat in my penthouse office, staring at financial documents spread across my glass desk like battle plans. The numbers told a story my family had never bothered to learn, a story of sacrifice and strategy that had transformed me from the struggling college student they remembered into something far more powerful than they could imagine. In 2018, I graduated from the University of Washington with a computer science degree and a perfect GPA, funded entirely by academic scholarships and 60-hour work weeks at two different campus jobs. While my classmates partied, I coded. While they networked at expensive bars, I built prototypes in my tiny studio apartment. My first job at Microsoft lasted exactly 18 months, long enough to learn how enterprise software worked, how billion-dollar decisions got made, and how much money there was to be made if you knew where to look. In 2020, I left to co-found North Star Technologies with my former teammate David Kim, using $15,000 I'd saved from living on ramen and instant coffee. The government contracts started small. A database modernization project for the Department of Veterans Affairs, a cybersecurity audit for the Port of Seattle, but each successful project led to bigger ones. And by 2022, we were handling $50 million in federal IT contracts annually. The Penthouse came in 2023, purchased with cash from my share of a data analytics deal with Homeland Security, $2.8 million that I earned while my family assumed I was just another cubicle-dwelling software engineer making decent money. They had no idea that North Star Technologies now employed 47 people and held government contracts worth over $200 million. They didn't know that I owned the entire building where I lived, not just the penthouse. They certainly didn't know about the investment portfolio Janet Morrison had helped me build or the real estate holdings scattered across Washington state. My net worth as of this morning was $53 million. But the number that mattered most was much smaller, $340,000. That was how much I had quietly paid over the past 6 years to keep my family afloat. House payments when Dad's construction work slowed down. Medical bills when Mom needed surgery. Student loans for Bella and Danny. Car repairs, credit card debt. Emergency expenses that somehow always became my problem to solve. I had been their safety net without them even knowing it, transferring money through shell companies and anonymous payments to protect their pride. The irony was devastating. They were trying to steal from the person who had already been saving them. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet Morrison, my financial advisor since the early days of North Star. Her office was in the same building as mine, and she'd been watching the family drama unfold with growing concern, ready to execute Plan B. I stared at the message for a long moment. Plan B was something we'd discussed hypothetically, a nuclear option if my family's behavior ever crossed certain lines. I'd never thought I'd actually need it. It's time I typed back, all of it. Within an hour, Janet was in my office with a thick folder of documents and the kind of grim expression usually reserved for declaring war. Are you absolutely sure about this? Once we go nuclear, there's no going back. They crossed every line already. I'm done protecting people who don't protect me. She opened the folder and spread out papers across my desk. Bank statements, corporate filings, real estate records, and legal documents that would change everything. Your family doesn't know that you own the building where Tyler's real estate firm leases their office space, she said, pointing to a corporate filing. Cascade Holdings, your shell company, has been their landlord for 18 months. I studied the lease agreement. Tyler's firm, Mitchell Properties, paid $8,000 monthly for a suite in a building I'd purchased as an investment. He'd been indirectly paying me rent without knowing it. There's more, Janet continued. I had our investigators look into Tyler's financial situation like you requested. He's in much deeper trouble than your family realizes. She slid a credit report across the desk that made my stomach drop. Tyler Mitchell had $127,000 in gambling debts spread across 6 different creditors. Credit cards maxed out personal loans in default, and a pattern of financial behavior that screamed desperation. The worst part was the timeline. The debts had been accumulating for over a year. But the payment demands had intensified dramatically in the past 3 months, right around the time Tyler started seriously pursuing my sister. There's something else, Janet said quietly. There's something else, Janet said quietly. 3 of his major creditors are the kind of people who don't just send strongly worded letters when you miss payments. Loan sharks. Let's call them non-traditional lenders with aggressive collection practices. I stared at the documents, pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. Tyler wasn't just financially irresponsible. He was in genuine danger, the kind that made people do desperate things, like marrying into families with wealthy sisters and plan elaborate schemes to steal their homes. Can we acquire his debts? I asked. Janet raised an eyebrow. All of them, all of them. I want to own every penny Tyler owes. That would cost about $130,000, including fees and interest. Are you sure you want to become his creditor? I thought about Tyler's smug face when he demanded measurements for furniture, about his casual assumption that my home would become his solution, about the way he'd pulled out his phone after my father slapped me, already calculating his next move. Do it. While Janet made calls to execute what she diplomatically termed debt consolidation, I contacted my other secret weapon. Sarah Chen had been my roommate at University of Washington and was now a corporate attorney with her own practice in downtown Seattle. She specialized in harassment cases and had been waiting for my call since Wednesday. Sarah arrived an hour later, carrying a briefcase full of evidence I didn't even know she'd been collecting. Security footage from my building showing my family's attempted entries. Recorded phone calls from the harassment campaign. Screenshots of the threatening text messages. This is textbook intimidation, Alex. We can get restraining orders and press charges if you want to go that route. I'm considering all options. She pulled out another folder. But there's something you should see first. I did some digging into Tyler's business practices. His real estate license is under review by the State Board for falsifying appraisals and taking kickbacks from mortgage brokers. So he's not just desperate, he's also potentially a criminal and sloppy. He listed your penthouse as potential collateral on 3 different loan applications in the past month, before he even proposed to your sister. The systematic nature of Tyler's plan was breathtaking. He'd identified me as a target, pursued my sister, and laid groundwork to claim my assets before the wedding even happened. My family's emotional manipulation was just the cover story for what amounted to an elaborate theft scheme. My phone rang. David Kim's name appeared on the screen. Alex, I just got some interesting intelligence from our friends in the defense contracting world. Apparently, Tyler's been bragging to people about family connections that are going to help him land some major government deals. What kind of connections? The kind that involve sisters who run companies with top secret clearances and $200 million in federal contracts. I closed my eyes, feeling the last piece of the puzzle snap into place. Tyler hadn't just wanted my home. He'd wanted access to my business, my contacts, my government relationships. The penthouse was just the beginning. David, how quickly can we restructure the corporate ownership to make it impossible for anyone to claim family rights to company assets? Give me 48 hours. After David hung up, I sat alone in my office, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, my family was preparing for their Saturday morning invasion, confident that family pressure and emotional manipulation would be enough to make me surrender everything I'd built. They had no idea they were about to discover who Alexandra Mitchell really was. Friday afternoon brought revelations that changed everything I thought I knew about my family's scheme. Sarah Chen returned to my office with a folder that made Tyler's gambling debts look like pocket change compared to the scope of his deception. Tyler's real estate license is under formal review by the Washington State Department of Licensing, she announced, spreading documents across my conference table. 3 separate complaints for falsifying property appraisals and accepting illegal kickbacks from mortgage brokers. I studied the official paperwork, noting dates that painted a disturbing timeline. The complaints had been filed over the past 8 months, right around the time Tyler started seriously pursuing Bella. There's more. He's been stealing from client escrow accounts to cover his gambling losses. We're talking about potential felony charges if the state attorney general decides to prosecute. How much money are we talking about? Sarah flipped through bank statements that showed a pattern of unauthorized transfers. Approximately $80,000 in client funds, moved in small increments to avoid detection. His firm's insurance will cover the losses, but Tyler's looking at prison time if this goes public. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Tyler wasn't. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Tyler wasn't just desperate for money. He was facing potential criminal prosecution, the loss of his career, and serious jail time. My penthouse wasn't just a convenient solution to his financial problems. It was his escape plan. My phone rang with David Kim's name on the display. Alex, I've got intel from my contact at Mitchell Properties. Tyler submitted paperwork yesterday listing your penthouse as his primary residence for insurance purposes. He's also updated his business address to match. Even before he has keys, even before the wedding reception was over, apparently. My contact says Tyler came in Sunday morning and filed the changes, told everyone it was a done deal. The audacity was breathtaking, but it revealed something important about Tyler's mindset. He wasn't hoping to convince me. He'd already decided that opposition was irrelevant, that family pressure and manipulation would inevitably wear me down. David continued with information that made my blood run cold. Tyler's been taking long lunches with potential investors, showing them photos of your building and talking about his family connections to government contractors. He's been promising access to federal contracting opportunities through his new sister-in-law, my sister-in-law who runs a company with top-secret security clearances. Exactly. He's essentially been selling access to you and your business relationships before even securing the first part of his plan. I hung up and immediately called Janet Morrison. How quickly can we execute the debt acquisition? I've got confirmation on 90% of Tyler's obligations. The remaining creditors are being more difficult, but we should have everything wrapped up by end of business today. Do it. I want to own every penny he owes before tomorrow morning. While Janet finalized what she diplomatically called the debt consolidation project, I received a call that escalated the situation beyond anything I'd anticipated. Miss Mitchell, this is Detective Maria Santos with the Seattle Police, Financial Crimes Unit. We understand you may have information relevant to an ongoing investigation into Tyler Mitchell. The formal tone made my stomach clench. What kind of investigation, embezzlement, and fraud charges related to his real estate practice? We've received complaints from multiple clients about missing escrow funds. Your name came up as someone who might have insight into his recent behavior patterns. I explained about the family pressure campaign and Tyler's desperate attempts to acquire my property, providing Detective Santos with documentation Sarah had prepared. By the time we finished talking, it was clear that Tyler's legal problems extended far beyond gambling debts and family manipulation. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. This wasn't just about a greedy brother-in-law trying to pressure me into giving up my home. Tyler was a criminal facing serious felony charges, and my family had aligned themselves with his scheme either knowingly or through willful ignorance. My phone buzzed with another call from my father. I'd blocked his primary number, but he was calling from what looked like a work phone. Alex, honey, let's talk like adults. His voice had shifted from the angry, demanding tone I'd grown accustomed to. Now he sounded almost conciliatory, which somehow felt more dangerous. What do you want? Dad, come to dinner. Sunday after this whole wedding nonsense settles down. We'll work this out as a family the way we should have from the beginning. The fake sweetness in his voice triggered something cold and analytical in my brain. Tyler's legal troubles were escalating faster than they'd anticipated. My refusal to cooperate was threatening their timeline. This wasn't reconciliation, this was panic. What has Tyler promised you, Dad? The question caught him off guard. Silence stretched long enough that I could hear construction noise in the background. He was calling from a job site, trying to sound casual while his world collapsed around him. I don't know what you mean, he finally said. But his voice carried uncertainty for the first time since this began. I know about his gambling debts. I know about the embezzlement investigation. I know he's been using Bella to get access to my business connections. So I'll ask again. What has Tyler promised you, Robert Mitchell? The man who'd controlled every family conversation through sheer force of personality for as long as I could remember, struggled to find words. You don't understand the whole situation, Alex. Tyler's just going through a rough patch. Young men make mistakes. Family helps families get through difficult times. By stealing my home, by making sacrifices for people we love. The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. Tyler had convinced my parents that his criminal behavior was just a rough patch, that helping him steal from me was actually an act of family loyalty. Dad, Tyler's facing felony charges. The FBI is investigating his business. Whatever he's told you about his problems, they're much worse than you know. Another long silence. When Robert finally spoke, his voice carried the edge of desperation I'd been expecting. That's exactly why the family needs to step up. Tyler made some bad choices, but he's learned his lesson. He just needs a fresh start somewhere new, like Seattle, in my penthouse, using my business connections to rebuild his criminal career in a different state. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. my penthouse, I said, surprising myself with the words. Bring everyone who thinks they have a say in my property. We'll settle this once and for all. Alex, that's not necessary. We can work this out between us. No, Dad. This ends tomorrow. Bring Tyler, bring Bella, bring whoever else you want as witnesses, but this conversation happens on my terms in my home. With everything on the table, I hung up before he could respond, then immediately called Janet. I need you to expedite the debt acquisition. I want to own Tyler's financial problems before tomorrow evening. Consider it done. But Alex, are you sure you want to confront them directly? This could get ugly. It's already ugly. Tomorrow night, we're going to find out exactly how ugly it can get. As I sat in my office watching the Seattle skyline turn pink with sunset, I realized that tomorrow's confrontation would determine more than just whether I kept my home. It would reveal whether my family saw me as a person deserving of respect or simply as a resource to be exploited when convenient. Either way, they were about to discover that the daughter they remembered, the one who always eventually gave in to family pressure, no longer existed. Saturday morning, my dining room looked like a war room. Documents covered every surface of the glass table, organized into neat stacks that represented the complete destruction of my family's scheme. Sarah Chen sat across from me, reviewing legal papers, while David Kim connected remotely from his home office, his laptop screen showing corporate filings and government contract details. Janet Morrison arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, carrying a briefcase that contained the most important documents of all. It's done, she announced, setting down papers that legally transferred ownership of Tyler's debts to Aid, shell company I controlled. As of 6 a.m. this morning, you own $127,000 in gambling obligations, plus accumulated interest and penalties. Tyler Mitchell now owes you, not various loan sharks and underground poker games. The irony was perfect. Tyler had been so desperate to steal my assets that he'd never considered I might simply buy his problems instead. Kevin O'Brien, the head of building security, entered with his own folder of evidence. Your family made 3 attempts to gain unauthorized access to the building this week. Thursday evening, your father and Tyler showed up with a locksmith, claiming family emergency access. Yesterday morning, your sister tried to convince the concierge that she was moving in and needed a spare key. I studied the security footage screenshots Kevin provided. There was Tyler in his expensive suit, gesturing angrily at my doorman. There was Bella in designer athleisure, pointing up toward my floor and clearly arguing with the front desk staff. They really believed they could pressure their way into my home through sheer determination and family guilt. Sarah pulled out her own collection of evidence. We now have 47 documented instances of harassment, including recorded phone calls, threatening text messages, and coordinated social media campaigns designed to pressure you into compliance. This meets every legal definition of criminal intimidation. The most damaging evidence was Danny's insider information. My youngest brother had been quietly documenting family conversations, recording phone calls where my parents discussed strategy for wearing down my resistance. Sarah played one particularly revealing recording where my father explained to Uncle Jim exactly how the penthouse acquisition would work. Alex has always been soft-hearted. Robert's voice came through the laptop speakers. She'll cave once she realizes the whole family is against her. We just need to keep the pressure up until she breaks. Soft-hearted. After everything I'd accomplished, after building a $50 million company from nothing, my own father still saw me as the weak daughter who would eventually surrender to family pressure. David's voice cut through my thoughts from the laptop screen. Alex, there's something else you need to know. Tyler's been using your name and company information in meetings with potential investors. He's been claiming that marriage into your family gives him access to classified government contracts. The violation felt personal in a way that even the theft attempt hadn't. Tyler wasn't just trying to steal my home. He was trading on my reputation, my security clearance, my years of building relationships in the defense contracting world. What kind of meetings? David pulled up emails he'd obtained through industry contacts. 3 separate venture capital firms, 2 private equity groups, and a defense contractor that competed directly with North Star Technologies. Tyler had been promising them inside access to federal contracting opportunities through his new family connections. He scheduled a pitch meeting for Monday morning with Blackwater Defense Systems. The presentation deck specifically mentions leveraging his sister-in-law, government relationships, and security clearances. My hands clenched into fists. Tyler was planning to use my marriage to my sister to steal my business, relationships, and potentially compromise national security contracts I'd spent years earning. Sarah leaned forward, her expression grim. Alex, this goes beyond family drama or even financial fraud. Tyler's talking about exploiting classified government relationships. The FBI should know about this. Not yet. After tonight's confrontation, we'll decide what law enforcement needs to know. Kevin reviewed security protocols for the evening meeting. Building lockdown during the conversation, all interactions recorded. Emergency contacts on standby. If this goes sideways, we're prepared for anything. But it was Janet who asked the question that had been nagging at me. Morning. Alex, what if you're wrong about this? What if, despite everything, family really should come first? Are you prepared for the consequences of destroying these relationships permanently? The doubt hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I was 12 years old again, being lectured about family loyalty and sacrifice. What if I was being selfish? What if successful people really did owe something to the families who raised them? Then I remembered my father's hand, connecting with my face in front of 300 wedding guests. I remembered Tyler's casual assumption that my home belonged to him. I remembered 47 instances of documented harassment designed to break my will. Family doesn't slap you in public and steal your home, I said, my voice steadying as the words came out. Family doesn't coordinate campaigns to destroy your peace of mind until you surrender your life's work. You don't manipulate people you love. Sarah nodded approvingly. You're not wrong, Alex. You're finally putting yourself first. As my team packed up their materials and prepared to leave, I sat alone in my penthouse looking out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere in this city, my family was preparing for what they thought would be my final capitulation. They'd probably brought emotional backup planned guilt-inducing speeches, maybe even coordinated tears to make me feel like a monster for protecting what I'd earned. They had no idea that the daughter they remembered, the one who'd always eventually give in to family pressure, had died the moment my father's palm connected with my cheek. Tonight, they were going to meet Alexandra Mitchell, the tech CEO, the woman who controlled $53 million in assets and held the power to destroy or protect anyone who tried to take what belonged to her. The question wasn't whether I was strong enough to stand up to my family. The question was whether they were prepared to discover exactly how much power they'd underestimated. Saturday evening at 7 p.m. sharp, a storm was building over Seattle as my doorbell rang with military precision. I opened the door to find 15 members of my extended family arranged like an invading army in my hallway. My father Robert stood at the front carrying a manila envelope and a small lockbox that I assumed was meant for my keys. Behind him, my mother Linda clutched paint swatches and fabric samples like victory trophies. Bella and Tyler flanked my parents, followed by Aunt Linda, Uncle Jim, cousins Sarah and Mike, and various other relatives I rarely saw outside of holidays. Even the Robinsons' family friends from Toledo had made the trip to witness what they clearly expected to be my surrender. Come in, I said calmly, stepping aside as they filed past me into the penthouse. They entered with the confidence of people who believed they'd already won. Bella immediately started pointing out features to her new mother-in-law, discussing where furniture would go. Tyler walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows and stood with his back to the room like he was surveying his new domain. Before we start, my team will be joining us, I announced. The door opened wider to reveal Sarah Chen in her sharpest business suit, followed by David Kim, Janet Morrison, Kevin O'Brien, and 2 additional lawyers whose presence immediately shifted the energy in the room. Robert scoffed, his voice carrying the dismissive tone I remembered from childhood. Fancy friends won't change the legal facts here, Alex. This is a family business. Uncle Jim stepped forward, trying to project authority. Alex, you need to remember that family comes first. That's how you were raised. Let me clarify some legal facts, I said, motioning for Sarah to distribute blue folders to every family member. This isn't just my penthouse. I own this entire 47-unit building complex. Gasps rippled through the group. Robert's face went from confident to confused as he opened his folder and stared at property deeds bearing my name. I also own the building where Tyler's real estate firm rents their office space through my investment company, Cascade Holdings. Tyler's face was drained of all color. The folder in his hands contained 18 months of rent payments his firm had been making to a company he'd never realized was connected to me. But that's not all. I continued as Sarah connected her laptop to my sound system. This is what the prosecutor heard when we filed criminal harassment charges. Yesterday morning, my father's voice filled the room through hidden speakers, his threats and manipulation tactics playing back with crystal clarity. Then came recordings of family members discussing strategy for breaking my will, coordinating pressure campaigns, and planning the theft of my property. Robert sputtered, trying to interrupt the audio. You can't record family conversations without permission. Sarah stepped forward with legal documents. Actually, Washington State is a one-party consent jurisdiction. Alex had every right to record conversations where she was a participant or where she had reasonable expectation that crimes were being discussed. Tyler lunged forward, desperation making his voice crack. You can't prove anything about my business. This is just a family drama blown out of proportion. I remained perfectly calm as Janet handed me a specific set of documents. Tyler, do you remember that $127,000 you owe in gambling debts? His face went white. How could you possibly know about that? I produced the legal papers that transferred ownership of his obligations to my shell company. Because as of yesterday morning, I bought every penny of debt you owe. I now legally control your financial future. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain hitting my windows. Tyler stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language, clearly struggling to understand how his victim had become his creditor. Bella started crying, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. Alex, I didn't know about any of Tyler's problems. I thought you were just being selfish about the apartment. Selfish. The word that had been weaponized against me for years finally lost its power, completely. Let me tell you about being selfish, I said, addressing my stunned family. Those anonymous payments that saved your house when Dad's work dried up, that covered Mom's surgery bills, that paid off Bella's student loans and Tyler's previous business debts. $340,000 over 6 years. All from me. Because I thought family meant protecting each other. My mother's hand flew to her pearl necklace, her voice barely a whisper. You paid off our house and Bella's car loan. And Danny's tuition. And Tyler's startup capital for his first failed business. Because that's what family does when they actually care about each other. Robert's shoulders slumped as the magnitude of his miscalculation became clear. We didn't know you'd helped so much. Tyler said you were just hoarding your success. Real generosity doesn't require applause, Dad. But manipulation and theft require consequences. I looked at each family member individually, my voice steady and final. If any of you contact me after tonight, these documents become public. Tyler, enjoy explaining fraud charges to your remaining clients. Dad, your union buddies will learn how you treat the daughter who saved your house. The storm outside intensified as I walked to my door and held it open. This meeting is over. One by one, they filed out into the rain. Robert moved like a man who'd aged 10 years in 30 minutes. Linda cried quietly into her handkerchief. Aunt Linda muttered apologies that came too late to matter. Tyler paused at the threshold, his voice pleading. Alex, those people I owe money to, they'll hurt me if I can't pay. You should have thought about that before you tried to steal my home to solve your problems. Only Danny remained behind, approaching me cautiously after the others had gone. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. And I'm sorry I was too scared to stand up to Dad sooner. We hugged, and for the first time in years, it felt like genuine family connection instead of obligation. As the elevator doors closed on the last of my relatives, I stood in my penthouse doorway, listening to the storm rage outside. The family I'd spent 34 years trying to please was gone, but the weight I'd carried for so long was finally lifting from my shoulders. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I was free. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the storm raging outside and my father's labored breathing. He stood in my living room, looking like a man who'd just watched his entire worldview collapse in real time. My mother's hand flew to her pearl necklace, her voice barely above a whisper. You paid off our house, I nodded, watching the shock register on her face. And Bella's student loans, Tyler's previous business debts, Danny's tuition. $340,000 total over 6 years. Because I believed family meant sacrifice. The number hung in the air like an accusation. All those anonymous payments, all those careful transfers through shell companies to protect their pride, all those times I'd quietly solved their problems while they dismissed my success as selfish careerism. Bella broke down completely, her carefully applied wedding makeup streaming down her cheeks in black rivers. I didn't know, she sobbed. Tyler said you were just being selfish, that you thought you were better than us because you had money. I looked at my beautiful sister, the princess who'd never had to work for anything, and felt a mixture of pity and exhaustion. Tyler had manipulated her just as thoroughly as he'd manipulated our parents, using her insecurities about being the lesser achiever to turn her against me. Tyler himself looked desperate now, all his smooth real estate agent charm stripped away to reveal the frightened criminal underneath. Alex, please, those people I owe money to, they'll hurt me if I can't pay. You have to understand, I was desperate. His pleading voice made my stomach turn. Should have thought about that before you tried to steal my home to solve your gambling problems. My father seemed to age 10 years in the space of our conversation. We didn't know how much you'd helped us over the years. If we'd known about all those payments? Because real generosity doesn't require applause, I said, standing to face my family with complete calm. But manipulation and theft require consequences. I walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the storm battering Seattle, then turned back to address each person individually. Tyler, your real estate license is under review for fraud. The FBI is investigating your embezzlement of client funds. Enjoy explaining those charges to whatever clients you have left. Tyler's knees actually buckled, and he had to grab the back of my couch for support. Dad, your union buddies at Morrison Construction will be very interested to learn how you treat the daughter who anonymously paid off your mortgage and kept you from losing the house. My father's face went gray as he realized his reputation in the tight-knit construction community would never recover from this story. Mom, your friends at the school district will hear about how you coordinated a harassment campaign against your own daughter to steal her home. Aunt Linda, Uncle Jim cousins, Sarah and Mike. I continued down the line. Everyone who participated in this scheme will face consequences if any of you contact me again. I walked to my front door and held it open as the storm intensified outside. This meeting is over. One by one, they filed past me into the hallway. My father's shoulders were slumped in complete defeat. My mother cried quietly into her handkerchief, mascara streaking her cheeks. Tyler stumbled like a man walking to his execution, which in many ways he was. Bella paused at the threshold, her voice small and broken. Alex, I'm sorry. I really didn't know about Tyler's debts or the money you'd given us. I just wanted what you had. I know, I said quietly. But wanting something doesn't give you the right to steal it. After the others had entered the elevator, only Danny remained. My 24-year-old brother approached me cautiously, his young face etched with an expression far older than his years. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. And I'm sorry I was too scared to stand up to Dad sooner. We hugged then, and for the first time in years, it felt like genuine family connection. Instead of obligation. Danny smelled like college laundry detergent and hope, and I realized that cutting toxic people out of your life didn't mean losing everyone. You're the only one who saw me as a person instead of a resource, I told him. After Danny left to catch up with the others, I stood alone in my penthouse, listening to the storm rage outside. The family I'd spent 34 years trying to please was gone, scattered into the Seattle night with their illusions shattered and their schemes exposed. But something unexpected happened as I closed the door. Instead of feeling lonely or abandoned, I felt lighter than I had in years. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the city clean. I sat at my kitchen island with coffee and my laptop, making a decision that felt like the final piece of reclaiming my life. I transferred $1 million to establish the Mitchell Family Scholarship Fund for students without family support, specifically targeting young people who'd been cut off or abandoned by toxic relatives. For the first time, I attached my real name to the donation instead of hiding behind shell companies. The Seattle Times picked up the story within hours. Local tech CEO establishes $1 million fund for students estranged from family. The irony was perfect. My phone buzzed with a text from Danny. Saw the news story. Coffee this afternoon. I want to hear about your scholarship fund. I smiled as I typed back. I'd love that. It's time to build the family I actually want. That afternoon, sitting across from my brother in a Capitol Hill coffee shop, I realized that sometimes losing the wrong people is the first step to finding the right ones. The family you're born into isn't always the family you're meant to keep. Danny raised his coffee cup in a toast to new beginnings and better boundaries. To proving your worth to yourself instead of people who refuse to see it, I replied. 3 months later, I received an email that made everything feel complete. A college freshman named Maria Rodriguez had received the first Mitchell family scholarship. Her parents had disowned her for choosing engineering over the family business, and she was working 3 jobs to pay for school, just like I had. The scholarship covered her full tuition room and board and living expenses, but more than that, it came with a mentorship program that connected scholarship recipients with successful professionals who understood what it meant to build a life without family support. Maria's thank you letter sat framed on my desk, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to succeed on their own terms. If you've ever had to choose between keeping toxic family members or protecting your own well-being, you know how difficult that decision can be. If you've ever been made to feel selfish for refusing to sacrifice everything you've built for people who've never sacrificed anything for you, please know that you're not alone in this struggle. Building boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. And sometimes the family that truly loves you is the one you choose, not the one you're born into. Subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your journey to finding your voice and protecting what you've earned matters. And this community is here to support you through it. The daughter they thought they knew was gone, but the woman I'd become was finally free to build the life I'd always deserved.